The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday morning. I am in Denver, Colorado, actually technically Aurora, Colorado. And you have spoken. The overwhelming response I got on comments and Twitter and elsewhere was that morning shows, summarizing the news, short shows, maybe 30 minutes, is something you guys value. So here I am. Now, the real measure of the fact that you value this will be your financial support. So in order to keep these going, I'd like to see either, a continued support on Super Chat. So far, the last two mornings were fantastic on Super Chat for a half an hour show, or increased support on the monthly basis. But this is my plan. And the plan will only be implemented in December because of my travel schedule, although I'll try to implement it as much as possible in between. But the plan is to do these shows every morning at 11 a.m. Puerto Rican time, which will be 10 a.m. East Coast time, 7 a.m. West Coast time. This will be great for the Europeans. But to do this basically every day, 5 days a week, not every day, 5 days a week during the week. No news on the weekend. You should be relaxing and enjoying yourself and having a good time. And then adjust the evening shows to maybe 3 times a week, where we go deeper into topics, more Yaron's Rules for Life type shows, more philosophical issues, maybe more interviews. We'll do those in the evenings because we'll get kind of the news roundup done in the morning. So that is the plan. It will be implemented, I think, consistently starting, and then again, consistently is hard in my life, but consistently starting in December once I stop traveling, although we'll try to get it going on a partial basis next week to the extent that I can while I'm traveling, and then again, the week of Thanksgiving, because I'll be home in the week of Thanksgiving. We'll do some, although again, on holidays, no news updates unless something dramatic happens. Holidays are supposed to be a time where you shouldn't be listening to the news, right? So that's the plan. Again, if you like this plan, I'd appreciate it if you express that in both Super Chat and in the, but on an ongoing basis of Super Chat, not just today. And then on monthly support, if some of you could increase monthly support, or some of you who don't support the show monthly, do so on Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, or on YaronBrookShow.com/support through PayPal. So you've got every option in the world. You can either do it through Venmo. If you want to do it through Venmo, you just have to email me and I'll give you the details on how to support the show on Venmo. All right, so today the topics are going to continue to be very similar to what they were in the last couple of, because it is what dominates the news cycle right now, and that is we'll start quickly with good news out of Ukraine, and then we'll turn to elections, and then we'll see how much time we have to cover other things, and of course we'll try to do as many of the Super Chat questions as we can in these morning shows. And maybe the Super Chat questions, we should try to focus the Super Chat questions on newsy-like events. So that would be terrific. So we keep consistent with the theme. So starting with Ukraine, I find it really interesting. So I wake up this morning and I look at the headlines as usual, and the headlines as usual are always hesitant and timid, and so the headlines were things like both Ukraine and Russia have something to lose from Russia's retreat from Kherson, and Russia retreating from Kherson. Is this good for Ukrainians or is it not? Who knows? God. And of course, it's all like the Russians intend to retreat, but will they actually retreat? And then you go and you actually look at the actual original news sources. You go back and you look at up to date what's actually happening on the ground now, because of course in Ukraine, The day is already late. It's the, I don't know, 8 hours forward or whatever, depending on where you are in the U.S. And, the Ukrainian flag is already flying in the middle of the city of Kherson. Ukrainian troops have basically taken the entire north coast, the north side of the Kherson province. The Russians have retreated. What is exactly the downside for Ukraine for this massive victory? What is exactly the potential upside for Russia for this clear defeat? Remember, Kherson is one of the provinces that Putin annexed to Russia. So technically, according to Russia, Kherson is a Russian province, and the city of Kherson, the city itself, is the capital of the province. So, God, there's nothing negative. There's nothing to hedge. There's not, and then I look back, and if you look at all the headlines from the beginning of this war and throughout the war, they are so negative. They're so what's the word? Respectful of Russia and respectful of Russian military strength and convinced that Russia is going to win this. I mean, there's even an article in Foreign Affairs magazine, the premier foreign affairs publication out there, and the Foreign Affairs magazine, the title of it, I just tweeted it out. The title of it is something like, Western weaponry will not make any difference in Ukraine. It will not help the Ukrainians stand up to the Russians. I mean, talk about a title that did not age well. Talk about a situation where it was completely wrong. Ukraine has had a major success. Kherson is now held by the Ukrainians. I mean, northern Kherson, southern Kherson is still Russian. We're now starting to enter winter. I was reminded of the fact that it is winter because in Ohio and Indiana, the weather was amazing. It was in the 60s and sun was shining. I reminded of the fact that it was winter when I arrived in Colorado last night. It is frigging cold here. I was just looking. It's 21 degrees outside right now. Now, the sun is shining. That's the beauty of Denver. 21 degrees. I'm not built for 21 degrees. This is not appropriate for human life. Where is global warming when you need it? Anyway, I'll be leaving the hotel in a little while, in a few minutes actually, and wrapping myself up to keep myself warm. But I'll be giving a talk at 10:30 this morning. It is right now close to 9 o'clock. My talks in Colorado are never videotaped. The talk, unfortunately, yesterday was not videotaped. It was a debate. It was kind of a debate on the regulatory state, but they did not videotape it, unfortunately. All right, so good news out of Ukraine. The Ukrainians continue to succeed against the Russians and push the Russians out of Ukraine and regain the territory from the Russians. Elections, we don't know much more today than we did yesterday, which is in and itself newsworthy. That is, the very fact that in the United States of America, it takes days and indeed weeks to determine races is pretty primitive and pretty ridiculous. I mean, Brazil, a country far poorer than the United States, a country with a large population, 250 million, a country with a vast territory that is geographically, it's a big country. I mean, within less than 24 hours, they had it done. It was finished. I mean, there are claims now, fraud, and they want recounts and all that. But, I don't think those claims are any more based on any more facts than the Trump claims were based on any facts. I don't know if you know, but in Brazil, there are massive demonstrations on behalf of Bolsonaro all over cities, hundreds of thousands of people out in the streets in support of Bolsonaro and against Lula. In spite of that, I think Lula will be sworn in as president on, I think it's January 1. But the election goes relatively smoothly, and I think because it's automated. In Europe, when elections happen, we know the next day who won, who lost, and it's finished. And it shouldn't take. We live in a world where I'm live streaming to you guys instantaneously over the web, video. How difficult is it to create an electronic system of voting where that is secure and where we get results instantaneously? instantaneously. Um, so it truly is shocking, disappointing, ridiculous, absurd. And of course, Republicans want to go backwards. I mean, they're good conservatives. They want to conserve the bad voting we have in the United States. They want, because they don't trust technology and they don't trust the machines. The machines are rigged. The software, it's watching you. It's going to control you. Anyway, they want all elections now to be hand counted. Let's take a couple of months. What the hell? Imagine an election system in which you could do it at home, and just go online and vote. Doesn't have to be a ceremony. It doesn't have to be inconvenient. It doesn't have to be a trek. It doesn't have to involve. Why can't you do it on your phone? Now, there's security issues, but God, I mean, how difficult could this issue be? I don't know, get Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and I don't know, George Soros together and they can solve this problem. I'm kidding. But, solve the electronics problem and let us vote on the phone and let's get the results within 5 minutes. I mean, as soon as voting ends, 5 minutes later, we should have the total results. I mean, our election system is a system run by Luddites. And it's absurd and ridiculous. I mean, I think we have cryptographers in the United States who can make a system like this immune from hacking. There are all kinds of ways you could do this, I think. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's somebody here who knows software and everything else. You could do it on the blockchain, which could verify your identity. You could upload you could confirm it with a picture. You could upload a passport or a driver's license, ID. Imagine that, having voting with IDs, and we could get this done. Anyway, we don't have results, so we still don't know who's going to control the House. We certainly don't know who's going to control the Senate. We might not know that until the runoff in Georgia. It still looks likely, but not super likely, but just likely. The odds favor the Republicans still winning in Nevada. The odds favor the Democrat winning in Arizona, and as a consequence of that, that would give the Democrats 49 and the Republicans 50, and it would all basically turn on Georgia, on the Georgian runoff, which will be done in December. I understand runoffs. Runoffs are fine. You have a rule, you have to get more than 50%, fine. But that you can't vote, you can't actually count votes. The other thing is the House. The House is taking much longer. It's ridiculous. We still don't know. Again, likely the odds favor the Republicans winning the House. No certainty there. It's precinct by precinct. It's district by district. And you have more districts that favor Republicans than Democrats. Republicans need fewer at this point wins to get to a majority. So again, it's likely Republicans will have a majority. What's shocking is not only the time it takes, but what's shocking is how I don't think anybody predicted that we would not know the House, who won the House, 3 days after the election. I think there was, they weren't sure about the Senate. The polls were mixed in the Senate, but the House, it was clear Republicans were going to win that. There was no question. Everybody predicted that. And yet, look where we are. We're 3 days later, and we still don't know. Let's see what happens. But it does look like the House will go Republican. People are analyzing the election results. I've been reading a bunch of analysis, and I think the overwhelming conclusion is, and this is the conclusion I had the day of the election, the overwhelming conclusion is that the affiliation with Trump and the affiliation with denying the 2020 elections had a clearly negative correlation with your success in the ballot. Now, not for everybody. Some deniers got in smoothly, but most of them, the closer you were to Trump, the more you emphasize the denier, the worse you did. Now, again, there's some exceptions to that. So candidate quality was the big issue. Republicans lost because the candidates sucked. More moderate Republicans or less Trumpist Republicans, less conspiracy theory-oriented Republicans would have won in a lot of these races. And you can see that, for example, take Georgia. Kemp, who, if you remember, Kemp, who ran for governor, stood up to Trump in 2020, and he got elected by a massive margin, right? There was some expectation that the Democrats would do well in Georgia in the governor race, given how well they did in 2020 and given how well they did in 2018 when the race between Kemp and Stacey Abrams was quite close. This time it wasn't even close. She's not claiming voter fraud this time because he trounced her. So why didn't Republicans down ballot, particularly in the Senate, do as well as Kemp did? If Kemp could attract all these voters being a Republican who stood up to Trump, why didn't Walker get the same votes? Well, because of his closeness to Trump, his closeness to the election denial. He did not get the votes. And you can see this in place after place after place. You see the same kind of pattern. You see Republican governors who've done the hard work, who've governed, who are not kind of associated with Trump. They did phenomenally well. And even the Republicans who won, senators like J.D. Vance, did okay. They won. But they didn't win by anywhere close to the margins the governors did. So there's a real case here for the Republican Party to move away from Trump if it wants to be successful in the future. Maybe one of the most surprising results in the House this round. Now, the results are not in yet, so we don't have final count, but it doesn't really matter because the direction here is important. And that is here in Colorado. I'm in Colorado, an election denier, a Trumpist, the worst kind of Republican, but she was in a district where she won last time by a big margin. Everybody expected her to win. It wasn't a lean Republican. This was a Republican county. And it hasn't been called because it's so close. Last night, I think the Democrat was leading by like 60 votes. I think as of this morning, she was leading by about 1,000 votes. I think as they count more votes, who knows what will happen. She probably will win in the end because this is a solidly Republican district. But to win by such a small margin, well, maybe people are sick. Maybe even Republicans are sick of the QAnon election-denying Trumpist nonsense. And what they want is, I don't know, at least normalcy. I don't know what normalcy is. I don't think they want compromising sellout Republicans, but maybe they want some kind of sense of normalcy. Maybe radicalism on behalf of liberty. Somebody should try that. Should try radicalism on behalf of liberty, on behalf of freedom. Now, maybe that won't sell either, but at least it would be nice to have somebody try it. Somebody out there should run on just a pro-free markets, pro-limited government, pro-individual rights, pro-shrinking government, let's do a test. Let's run it on reforming Medicaid and Medicaid and Social Security. Let's run on an actual liberty platform. Not as a libertarian, as a Republican. Let's run on such a platform. Let's see what happens. It would be interesting. And not as an objectivist. You don't have to be radical. You don't have to do it all the way. Phasing out, modifying, changing, trimming, moving in the right direction. Don't be radical. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Just orientation. How about a candidate who runs on a pro-liberty orientation? Not final thing, orientation. Jeremy says Paul Ryan. The problem with Paul Ryan is he would often talk like that and he would often propose legislation like that. I mean, Paul Ryan, as much as people love to hate him, he's the one who proposed a budget that converted Medicare to a voucher system, which would have been brilliant. God, would that have been brilliant. And all kinds of stuff like that. And the Republicans he and the Republicans proposed those kind of budgets when they were in the opposition and they knew they would never pass. When they held the House, but they didn't have the White House or the Senate, so they knew it would be vetoed. As soon as they became the majority, they abandoned it. And Paul Ryan, unfortunately, has a long track record of talking the talk, and then when it comes to voting the status line. So, for example, he voted for the expansion of Medicare, Part D of Medicare. He voted for a lot of really crappy government expansions in the Bush years. He did not stand on principle at all. So we need somebody who is, quote, normal, but who actually not just pushes for a pro-liberty agenda, but votes that way and consistently votes that way and plays it consistently. So we will see. So again, lesson learned from this election. I keep repeating this, and I know I'm a little repetitive. Lesson learned is they need to move on from Trump, and they need to move away from Trump. It's pretty obvious. Connor says Senate is going to be 51-49 Democrats. Potentially, if Republicans, certainly if Republicans will lose in Nevada. If they then if Republicans lose Nevada and Arizona, then it's then the runoff will determine whether it's 51-49 or 50-50. I think Nevada is key, and of course the runoff in Georgia. I don't know how the runoff in Georgia will play out, but I think the Nevada is going to be close. So until we get the result from Nevada, I'm not going to predict here. But there are reasons to believe that, in spite of the fact that the Republicans are holding a lead in Nevada, that lead might disappear because the remaining votes are Democratic votes, and that ultimately the Democrat will win. All right, let's see where we are. Another just a quick story that I was reading about was you remember the South Korean stampede? 100,000 people were in these little alleys and narrow alleys around Itaewon in South Korea. A stampede. It wasn't even a stampede. They didn't rush anyway. It was just the sheer number of people landed up crushing 150 people to death, 200 people injured, almost all of them young, teenagers or in their early 20s, most of them girls. Just horrible, horrific. Well, there's a big investigation going on in South Korea into what happened and why the police didn't kind of clear the crowd, seeing the problem. This is kind of the stuff that police should be doing in terms of recognizing a real potential problem and trying to not allow crowds like that in little alleys to accumulate. And it turned out there were a number of 14, I think, phone calls made into the police in the hours before the actual tragedy happened. And police went out there. They scattered the crowd, and then they left. They didn't stay. They didn't. So there seems to be some kind of police failure, and the South Koreans, are really investigating this. And they came to the conclusion that that after the fact, one of the policemen had deleted some of the information that showed the incompetence and the incompetence of the police, and deleted some of the intelligence the police had that showed that they should have known better and they should have done more and they could have prevented this. This morning, they were investigating it. They found that the policeman who had deleted this stuff, he was part of the intelligence unit of the South Korean police. This morning, they found him dead in his home, almost certainly from suicide. It is interesting the way some Asian cultures respond to failure. There are consequences. And he knew there would be consequences, and he took his own life. I'm still waiting to see what the consequences are going to be for the complete failure of, what was the name of that town in Texas? Uvala, where they didn't storm the classroom, where they waited and kids were dying and bleeding out, and really nothing happened. And what are going to be the consequences? Now, I don't expect anybody to commit suicide. I'm not suggesting that's the appropriate way to do it, but it's clear that in South Korea there were going to be consequences. The question is, Uvalde, will there be real consequences to the complete disaster that I think was Uvalde in terms of that? All right, final story. I think an important story, and I think you'll all agree with me. A good story, a good outcome, at least for now. We'll see how this works through the court. But yesterday, a judge in Texas ruled that the Biden administration did not have the authority to do the student loan forgiveness program. The judge ruled that should have been a legislative issue and not an executive issue, that it was beyond the authority of the executive. I'm always happy when the executive power is reduced. I think executive power in the United States has just become ridiculous. Executive orders, it feels authoritarian. We have a system of checks and balances. We have a system that delegates to the legislature certain things, and a system that delegates to the executive certain things. And we've completely abandoned that system, where executives now do a lot of what the legislature should do, including elements of foreign policy and declaring war and tariffs. The tariffs should be something the legislature passes. No, the legislature's given that authority to the executive. Well, in this case, the court ruled that the executive does not have the authority to unilaterally do away with these student loans. It's a lengthy decision. It's not a lightly held decision. Now, it is a Trump appointee, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think we'll see whether the Biden administration will appeal this. There's still no word if they will or not. But as of 5 minutes ago, CNBC is reporting that the Biden administration will stop taking applications for student loan forgiveness. So a win. We got a win. And as I've said often, I actually think the healthiest portion of our system of government, in spite of Hobbes, the healthiest portion of our system of government are the courts. I think you're going to see the courts, particularly the Supreme Court, rein in executive power, at least to some extent. But more importantly, I think you're going to see the Supreme Court rein in the authority of agencies, of regulatory agencies. I think there's this important, there's going to be significant work to rein in the power of the EPA, of different regulatory agencies, and giving the power back to the legislature. Now, I think a lot of what the legislature does should be ruled unconstitutional. I don't think that will happen, but at least we're going to see the what do you call it? What people call the administrative state, the regulatory state, reined in by the courts. Now, this is counter to the new Republican judicial theories coming out of Vermeule in Harvard and others, and we'll see how long they have before they have an impact on the courts. Vermeule and others who argue that the administrative state should be used more and should actually be grown from a Republican perspective to impose right-wing ideals on us. But that is not the position of the court today. People like Gorsuch and even Alito, but Gorsuch and Thomas have a decent view, a good view of regarding reining in the regulatory state, and that's going to be one thing that I think the courts are going to do well. And I think here's another one. I think this court would have ruled Obamacare unconstitutional. I think this composition of the courts. So things like that are going to be ruled unconstitutional. Things like this are going to be sent back to the legislature. Things like this, like the student loan forgiveness, are not moving forward, and that is good. That is good. All right. Let's see. Where are we here? Did we lose connection, or are we all good? All right. Let me do some super chats. I don't have a lot of time here because I do have to run to give a talk and it's I have to get an Uber and I have to pack and I have to get an Uber to get out there. But let me just do this quickly. So let's do a few super chats and move on. Thank you, Shokato. Hamad says the short morning shows are a great addition to your channel. It's nighttime here, so it's perfect for me. So thank you, Hamada. You're contributing in dollars. I can't tell where you're from, but $50, that is great. All right, Thomas Schubadam. Thank you, Thomas. Did the US and UK need the Soviet Union to help defeat Nazi Germany? Roosevelt and Churchill clearly thought so, although Churchill was clearly far less naive about Stalin than Roosevelt was. You know, it's hard to tell how naive or not they were or might have been, but look, it depends what you mean by needed the Soviet Union. I think they had the Soviet Union whether they supported the Soviet Union or not. That is, it is Hitler that opened up a second front. It is, remember, and this is important to remind people all the time, World War II begun when Hitler and, important and, capital and Stalin invaded Poland. Stalin was Hitler's ally in the beginning of World War II, and that is super important. Nobody remembers that. Nobody talks about it, but it's super important. So Hitler did not need to open a second front. Stalin was his ally. So Hitler opening up a second front was good for the US and UK. It helped expedite the war. The question is, did the United States need to massively support Stalin in his effort to fight Hitler? And I think the answer is no. Ayn Rand certainly thought the answer was no. Both Stalin and Hitler ultimately were weak. And they would have fought and fought and fought and fought. Now, the Russians, it would have taken longer for the Russians to win. It would have cost them a lot more. But they would still have, maybe Hitler would have made it to Moscow. Ultimately, Napoleon made it to Moscow. But the winters are brutal. And it would have drained troops both from Hitler, and I think the war would have happened was maybe the war would have been a little longer. Maybe I'm not even sure of that. Particularly if the United States had let Patton run the war, then it would have been significantly shorter. But on the Allied side, instead of compromising, politicizing Eisenhower, but what certainly would have happened is that Eastern Europe wouldn't have fallen to the Soviet Union. Russia would have had a much harder time defeating the Nazis. Maybe they never would have. Maybe they would have been fighting to a kind of stalemate somewhere in Russia. Maybe they would have been, but that would have still occupied Nazi troops. And all the West needed, all the US and the UK needed, was Nazi troops to be occupied on the Eastern Front. Once they were occupied there, I don't think the US needed a Soviet victory. They just need a Soviet to keep the Nazis occupied. And I think that would have happened no matter what. So you never finance your enemy. You never send them troops. We shouldn't have done that with bin Laden in Afghanistan, and we shouldn't have done it with Stalin in World War II. And I think the consequence of doing it with Stalin in World War II is that we handed him all of Eastern Europe. Just a travesty. And even that was not necessary because, again, Patton could have taken Eastern Europe, parts of Eastern Europe at least, before the Russians ever got there. But Eisenhower and the rest of and FDR and Churchill made promises to Stalin, and they kept those promises. But the promise was to enslave, all the peoples of Eastern Europe for decades and decades, which is horrific. And why they would do such a thing after compromising with Hitler and seeing that where that led, it's hard to believe the power that pragmatism has on people. But it certainly does on our politicians. All right, quickly, let's do a few other super chats. And really, let's try to do for these morning shows, let's try to do super chats that are more related to the newsy stuff and the bigger questions, the bigger issue stuff. Let's try to do for the evening ones. So if you can, ask news-related questions, but we'll see. All right, Michael asks, most of human history is just new people making old mistakes. Yeah, I mean, I've often said that people don't learn from experience because you need ideas to be able to learn the appropriate lessons from experience. You need a positive philosophy. You can't just learn from the mistake happening. You have to actually understand what happened. You have to understand causality. You have to understand, what drove the mistake, what's going on. All right. It still amazes me how much deeper, this is Michael, how much deeper Ayn Rand is than any of these clowns. Absolutely. Michael, if a man does not control his temper, it is a sad admission that he is not in control of his thoughts. I think that's right. But look, sometimes you get angry. But you're right. The key is controlling. The key is to find a way to control it. All right. Colt says, I'm disappointed in the GOP, but they got what they deserved. Yes, Colt, they did. I really hope they learned their lesson. The Ukraine issue almost made me not vote for them. Also, did Ukraine impact this midterm? Keep it up. I think it probably did. Again, I don't think it. I think only at the margin, but probably did. Some of these Republicans going after Ukraine and being pro-Putin, I don't think helped their cause. I don't think mainline Republicans out there are pro-Putin. I don't think mainline Republicans out there, I think, support Ukraine and want to see Ukraine defeated. Even a lot of people I know who supported Trump still think that Ukraine should be defeated, and it's okay to support the Ukraine in an effort to defeat Russia. Russia should be defeated. Sorry. So I think that definitely had an impact. I do think that this election is good for Ukraine. That is, I think McCarthy, who said, I'm not sure the Republicans will support the Ukraine effort. I think they will support it. I think that their margin of victory is so small that they will go along with this one as part of what they do. So I do think this is good for the Ukraine war, this outcome. I think if they'd won big, they might have taken that as a mandate to do to stop the funding to Ukraine, and that would have been, I think that would have been bad. Bonnie says you are appreciated. Thank you, Bonnie. I really appreciated that. I appreciate the fact that I'm appreciated by some. Shakator says, started watching your show quite regularly after attending in-person debate with Richard Wolff. Thank you for your show. Wow, that's spectacular. I'm curious, Shakator, when you came to the debate with Richard Wolff, were you already on my side? What were your political, philosophical views at that point? Had you read Ayn Rand before the debate? Have you read Ayn Rand after the debate? That would all be amazing information for me to just get a good sense of all of that. All right, that is it for the super chat. Thank you for all the contributors. If Shakato writes that up in the comments quickly, that would be great. I don't know, Catherine, we're going to have to set some goals for the shorter programs that are maybe not obviously lower than the long programs, but are still significant, that is still respectable. But we'll see how all this evolves. All right, everybody. New goals for short shows. Maybe it's something like $250 or something like that. That would be good. And that will encourage maybe some people to help get us there, some of our whales to get us there. All right, thanks everybody. Let's see. Over the weekend, we'll do some regular shows. Not sure about Saturday, but certainly Sunday. And hopefully we'll have a show on Monday as well. And then next week, I might do some of these morning shows or not. I'll be in Costa Rica and Mexico. So it's really going to depend on the quality of the Wi-Fi and also the timing of my flights. So I just don't know if it is realistic and to what extent it's realistic. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Hopefully by next week, we'll know a little bit more about who actually won these elections. Somebody work on this. Solve the problem. Get Elon Musk and those guys on not just tinkering with Twitter. Oh, I did want to say quickly, I'm just going to say this quickly because I have to run. I was on there was Elon Musk did on Twitter, he did a news conference type thing or Q&A and on audio, and I participated. I can't remember what platform it was, but I found out through Twitter. And it was quite interesting. I mean, obviously he's very thoughtful. The guy's very smart. I only listened to a segment of it, but after listening to that segment, I'm more optimistic about his ability to reform Twitter. We will see what actually happens. And the fact that there's chaos on Twitter right now, that's how entrepreneurs often work. Chaos is a way ultimately to build. And I got my blue checkmark. I paid $8 and I got my blue checkmark. I know a lot of people are making fun of me for that, but I got it. Now we'll see if it matters. If you don't follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitter now that I have the checkmark, because you know it must be me. Although they didn't do anything to verify my identity. I just paid $8 and I got it. So I don't know in what sense it was verified. Maybe the credit card had the same name as my name. I don't know. Has anybody tried to pay the $8 and get verified and turned down? That would be an interesting experiment. Is this just a way to get $8 from us and the checkmark means nothing and the verification means nothing? And if it's not verified at all, then I was just scammed out of $8. That's okay. This is an experiment. So let's see what happens if the $8 buys me anything. Does it give me a different status? Is my Twitter accounts, are they going to grow faster now that I paid the $8? It's $8 a month. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. I will see you all certainly on Sunday, and hopefully you can join then. Not sure exactly what time. We'll figure that out. But see you all soon. Bye, everybody.